Book 1, Chapter 7 of the Nicomachean Ethics really is the heart of the argument of the entire book. Really, when Aristotle says that the beginning is more than half the whole, I think this chapter is really what he's thinking about. If you can get the argument at the core of Book 1, Chapter 7, you'll see that the entire rest of the book is in some ways just a matter of unpacking that claim. Now, of course, the problem is there are times where Aristotle will say the same thing over and over and over again. He's got just multiple chapters about courage, for example. But meanwhile, there are other times where Aristotle will say very quickly, in a sentence or so, something that you kind of wish he would have spent a page or so maybe spelling out, unpacking. And that's really what happens here, this important transition sentence in Book 1, Chapter 7. Aristotle says, listen, at this point, we've said that happiness is the greatest good achievable by action. It's, self-sufficient, but all of these things are platitudes. We still haven't really said what happiness is. We've just basically kept saying, well, happiness is the point, the highest thing, the thing that we're all looking for. So here, this in transition sentence, Aristotle says we might figure out what happiness is if we could first ascertain the characteristic function of man. And he doesn't really explain why that is, and I think it's likely to strike you as kind of a confusing claim out of nowhere. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to shift that sentence around just a little bit. Think of it from another perspective. What is the purpose of human life? And if you say, well, the purpose of human life, at least what we've been saying so far in the Nicomachean Ethics is, well, to be happy, right? My purpose in life is to be happy. Everything that I do, every action I take is done for that sake. So in that case, we could say that being successful at being human is the same thing as being happy, right? If that's the goal of being a human, then to be successful at that, you're happy. And so if we could just figure out what it means to be human, then we could say being successful at that is by definition being happy. And so what Aristotle's going to do here is he's going to just shift our perspective on this same question. We're just going to approach it from another direction. He's going to say, if we can just figure out essentially what it means to be human, what the purpose of being human is, what the function of being human is, then we'll be able to say, well, being successful at that is, by definition, happiness. But that said, how do you find the characteristic function of something, the essential function? What does that even mean? Well, I guess let's sort of take a step back here and think about something easier. I want you to go out to your kitchen right now and take a look around at the various kind of tools you have around that kitchen. Right? There is a toaster oven, there's a microwave, there's a skillet, there is maybe a slow cooker or an air fryer or a refrigerator, etc., 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 right? So I want you to just take all of these kitchen implements, these kitchen gadgets, these kitchen things, and just line them all up. And I want us to just look at one of these things and ask, well, how would we go about figuring out or identifying the essential function of this thing? Now, of course, if you already know that this thing is called a toaster, if you've already used one of these things, you go, well, I know what the essential function is already, right? I want you to pretend you're like an alien anthropologist. You've come to study our ways, you've never seen these things before, and now you're going to try to figure out, well, what is this thing for? What is this thing used for? What is its real central purpose or function? And again here, if you could just find the user's manual, right? Or if you could just find it labeled very clearly, well, that would be an easier way to figure it out as well. But I want you to imagine, you can't find a user's manual, you can't find a label on the thing, you just have this thing from the kitchen, and you're going to try to figure out, well, what is its purpose? What is its true purpose? I want you to imagine how you might, almost like a scientist, go about discovering this, right? So spend some time playing with it. See all of the various things that it does. Well, let's see. If you put some papers underneath it, it will hold them in place, right? A wind blows through, the papers don't blow away. It's kind of heavy. It's got some heft to it. So if someone were to barge into your house uninvited, you could throw this thing at them or sort of hit them over the head with it, and it would hurt. That would make a decent sort of a self-defense weapon. Meanwhile, this lever, if you push that down, it gets hot inside, and it's got these, little slits in the top that fit pieces of bread kind of nicely. So if you were to drop some pieces of bread in there and put that lever down, you'd have yourself toast in a couple of minutes. And meanwhile, it is, about 6-8 inches tall. And, if yours is made of metal the way mine is, it's somewhat stable. And so let's say there's something off the top of the refrigerator you can't quite reach. You could put this on the ground and step up on it and reach things down, right? So on and so on and so on. You're a creative person, I'm sure. You could find any number of possible uses for this thing. But now, here's the thing, right? All of the things you can do with this thing. What is it that makes one of those its essential function, its central purpose? How would we figure that out? And so rather than just trying to figure out what this thing does, Aristotle's point is, we might come at this thing and ask, well, what makes it distinct? What makes it unique? What makes it different from all of the other things in your kitchen? And so now look at what this thing does that nothing else does. This thing holds papers in place, but you've got lots of heavy things to hold papers in place. And in fact, if it only held papers in place, it wouldn't need that lever, it wouldn't need the electric coils inside. You could even make it a little heavier and smaller, something like a paperweight. And likewise, yeah, it'll help you reach things up off the top of the refrigerator, but it's not really got a great broad base. That step stool over there sure does that job a whole lot better, doesn't it? And likewise, if I want to hit somebody who breaks into my house uninvited, yeah, I could use this thing, but I've got any number of things, even in my kitchen, that probably do better. I mean, that skillet, you can do some damage swinging a skillet, man. But here's the thing, the one thing this thing does that nothing else seems to do anywhere near as well is toast bread, right? Nothing else. I mean, I can put bread in the microwave, but it just gets kind of hot and chewy. I can put bread in the oven, and now it gets kind of overly dried out. It's all sort of breadcrumbs when I'm done with it. I can put it on the stovetop, and then it just burns one side. But if I stick it in this toaster, man, it toasts bread so much better than anything else in my kitchen does. And that's how I might come to say, look, that is its essential purpose, right? Its central purpose. That's what this thing does that makes it different, sets it apart from anything else in your kitchen. Now, in the same way, in order to figure out the essential function, the characteristic, the central purpose of being human, what Aristotle's going to do is he's going to line up all living things, and he's going to ask, what is it that makes humans distinct, separate, unique, special? What is it that sets us apart from any other kind of a living thing? So, of course, you've probably got some ideas to kind of jump right to the end, the punchline of this story. You see where it's going, but let's go through and work our way there carefully. The way Aristotle's going to do this is not just by jumping to what makes us different. He's going to start by sort of ruling out the things that don't make us different. And so we can just start by looking at this entire field of living things. And we can ask, what is it that all of these things have in common? What does it mean to be alive? And there already, I think, is a fun philosophical question. Walk into a biology department and start some arguments around that question. But here's what we can notice. Every living thing, be they single-celled organisms, bacteria, mold, all the way on up to the most complicated shark or elephant, what they're all going to do is take in resources, right? Eat, breathe, etc. They're going to take in resources, and they're going to use those resources, that energy, to grow and do things, right? Multiply. And so what Aristotle calls then the life of nutrition and growth, he says, is common to every single living thing. If you don't do that, you're just not alive. And so he says that therefore can't be our essential function, right? Human life can't be all about that, because that doesn't make us any different than paramecia. That doesn't make us any different than mice or oak trees. And so now if we were to set aside every living thing that pretty much only does that, what are we setting aside? And so here, certainly, Aristotle's really not that familiar with single-celled organisms and bacteria, but we know we would pretty much set those aside. But likewise, plants, right? Plants are fairly boring to hang out with, and it's because really about their only activity is just taking in resources and growing. So Aristotle calls this then the life of plants. Not that it makes plants different from us, but it's in the sense in which we ourselves are just like plants. So we'll set that aside. If we set aside everything that only takes in resources and grows, what are we left with? Well, we're left with humans and animals. And the question is, well, what is it we share with them, right? What is it that makes an animal different from a plant? And here, you might start to think about some various things. I mean, some animals move, right? But maybe not all, and not necessarily that much. However, even those animals that do move seem to need to be able to sort of negotiate their way through their environment. And now we're getting closer, because what every animal seems to have in common, and what sets us apart, as far as I know, from every plant, is perception. So of course, not necessarily just the five senses that humans have, right? Some animals have senses we don't, like a magnetic sense of north, for example, and other animals can't sense some of the things that we do. There are animals that are blind or deaf, for example, but every single animal seems to have some sort of perception, some sort of ability to perceive. And so what Aristotle calls the life of perception, that he says is common even to the horse and the ox. This is the way in which we are the same as animals, albeit set apart from plants. And so here again, perception can't be the thing that makes us human. This can't be the purpose of being human, because this is how we are similar to animals. And now notice what this means is that perception, if perception can't be our purpose, then fulfilling perception can't be happiness, right? So this will be another argument against straight pleasure as what it means to be happy, right? Pleasure is just something you feel. Animals can feel pleasure. That doesn't set us apart. And likewise, I think this is also a matter of not just perceiving what's outside, but also perceiving what's within, right? So if pleasure isn't enough, it's also not a matter of just having feelings or emotions. That doesn't make us human. That just makes us living animals, right? Our emotions don't set us apart as humans. They're what connect us with the rest of the animal world. And so what's going to set us apart as humans can't be that. We'll set it aside. And what are we left with? Now here, and you've seen this coming a mile away, but the thing that makes us distinct and different from every other animal that we know of is our ability to reason. And so there remains then, Aristotle says, this active element of the rational principle, right? Reason seems to be what sets us apart. Now, no sooner has Aristotle identified reason as the thing that sets us apart, though, that I want you to notice what he does. And this next sentence is just really dense and difficult. I find I have to sort of read it multiple times before I get it, and even then I'm sort of filling in some details afterwards. So I want you to notice, he says there remains the element that has an active rational principle. And here, instead of just a period, you get that semicolon, right? And now watch what the second half of the sentence does, just structurally. He'll say, of this, one part does this, while the other part does that. So just notice, before you even know what he's doing with these two parts, what he's doing is he's taking reason and he's breaking it into two parts. Now, reason is what sets humans apart from animals, and so it's not like some humans have this reason and some humans have that. All humans share this capacity for reason, this rational element. But what he's doing is that rationality itself, reason, he's going to split into two parts. Now, why split it into two parts? Well, I want you to notice now what he says about these two parts, right? The one part has it in the sense of exercising, possessing one and exercising thought. The other has it in the sense of being obedient to oneself. So we've got this active part of reason and the obedient part of reason. What does that mean? What does it mean to obey oneself? And so I want you to think about those times where you can obey or even disobey yourself. And I want you to think about what's going on there, right? Let's imagine you want to go on a diet. You say to yourself, okay, I'm gonna try South Beach diet, no more carbs forever. And so you've made your decision now to go on this diet. And so you go over to your friend's house and your friend has just baked a chocolate cake. And your friend says to you, hey, do you want some chocolate cake? And you say, well, yeah, I want some chocolate cake. So now you're eating this delicious, warm, moist chocolate cake. But of course, what's going through your head? You're going, I said I wasn't going to do this. I said I was going to go on a diet. I said I wasn't going to have carbs. I'm breaking my promise. What am I doing? Right? You're arguing with yourself in your head. In order for that argument to take place, notice you've got to be not just one person up here, but two, right? You are the person who is saying to you, don't eat those carbs, but you're also the person who's saying, I'm going to eat them anyway. You're the person who is commanding yourself, but also the person who is right now disobeying yourself. And it's that internal struggle that we think of as, guilty feelings and beating yourself up. And compare how this is different than if I were to say to you, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to go on South Beach. I'm not going to eat carbs for a couple of weeks. You might say to me, that's ridiculous, right? You don't really have to lose any weight. No one's allowed to go to the beach right now anyway with the pandemic. It's just not worth getting, why do this? And let's say you talk me into it, right? Okay, fine. You've convinced me. I won't go on South Beach. I don't need a diet. I'm fine. Now, when I go over to my friend's house and he has some chocolate cake and he says, hey, do you want some chocolate cake? And of course I say, yes, I want some chocolate cake. Now, as I'm eating that chocolate cake, notice what's going on in my head. There's no struggle. There's no argument. There's no beating myself up about it. There is simply happily eating that chocolate cake. And why? Well, because I changed my mind, right? And when I change my mind, I no longer have to live up to those things I told myself to do yesterday. It's if I haven't changed my mind that now I might be disobeying myself and now I feel guilty, right? So what I want to stress here is that just part of being rational is not just being one person in there, but two. Rationality has these two parts to it. Rationality is not just awareness, but rather self-awareness, right? You can think about what it means to be you. You can talk to yourself. It's that reflective capacity that we keep coming back to. And so now we've got this element that has rationality in the sense of being obedient or disobedient to oneself. But this other part that has rationality in the sense of exercising thought and possessing oneself. Now, why does Aristotle split rationality like this? Well, notice what this means is that rationality isn't just one thing or activity that sets humans apart. What this means is that there are two different characteristic activities of rationality. And if humans are rational, if that's what sets us apart from animals, then it's going to be both of these activities that really make us distinctly human. Now, if being happy is a matter of being good at being human, and if being human is a matter of engaging in these two kinds of rational activities, then it will turn out that being happy is going to be a matter of being good at engaging in these two characteristic activities of being human, these two fundamentally rational activities. And we can call one of these activities self-governance, right? I give myself commands and I obey them. I don't disobey them. And notice, self-governance, this is going to be a matter of how humans are capable of acting intentionally. We don't just react to things the way cockroaches do when you shine a light on them. We don't just automatically act the way an oak tree does in the presence of sunshine. We act deliberately, right? We think about what we're going to do and we can act intentionally, deciding what to do. But meanwhile, there's going to be this whole other activity of reason that doesn't involve making decisions or acting. It's just thinking all by itself. And so, for example, if you are learning math, or if you are doing philosophy, or if you are thinking about what you want to do with the rest of your life, or if you are making plans for later on, you're daydreaming about something, if you are making up stories, all of these things are things that you do using your mind, using reason, that aren't a matter of making decisions and telling yourself what to do. This is a whole separate human activity. And so now being good at being human is going to be being good at both of these things, both thinking all by itself, using your intellect, and being good at governing yourself, making good decisions and following through on those decisions. Now, of course, Aristotle will sum this all up after this bit about the lyre player. Right? No one plays the lyre anymore. Guitarist, right? What does it mean to be a good guitarist? Well, a good guitarist is good at playing the guitar. And so what does it mean to be a good human? Well, a good human is good at being human. So if that's the case, Aristotle will say, human good turns out to be activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Here, I had better pause because we've got a couple of terminological issues to sort through. At the end of this big paragraph about how you have to be good at being human in order to be happy, and being good at being human is a matter of just being good at thinking, all of a sudden this last sentence makes it sound like Aristotle has smuggled in morals on us. All of a sudden he's saying you have to be a nice person in order to be happy? No, that's not what he's saying. So two things here, right? First, when Aristotle says soul here, he means mind. So it's activity of mind, rational activity. So again, not just necessarily activity of body, not just activity of appetites, activity of mind. And when he says in accordance with virtue, the word virtue here is a translation. Aristotle's not writing in English, of course. English hasn't been invented yet. Aristotle's writing in Greek. The term Aristotle uses is arete. Arete means excellence. Now that word gets translated as virtue for certain historic reasons we don't necessarily have to go into here. But when Aristotle says virtuous activity, here's the important thing. I don't want you to assume he means morally good activity. Instead, what Aristotle is saying is that the activity has to be excellent. Now, what does it mean to be excellent at an activity? Well, let's come back to that lyre player or that guitarist. What does it mean to be good at playing the guitar? Well, you might think what it means to be a good guitarist is that you play music and other people like it, right? But that's certainly not what makes you a good guitarist. So, for example, if you are into punk music, the whole point of punk music is that you don't have to be any good at your instrument. You just get up there with the right attitude and make the right noise, and I'm gonna love it. But meanwhile, if you are not so into, say, progressive rock, all that sort of pondering 70s nonsense, then you might know very well you can be really, really, really good at playing the guitar, but you still might try to do something. You might then do something that I'm not all that interested in, right? I don't necessarily want to listen to what you're doing, even though I won't deny that you are really good at playing the guitar. And so here's the important thing. I don't have to appreciate what you're doing for you to be good at doing that activity. What does it mean to be good at that activity, though? Aristotle's point is going to be that there are standards internal to the activity itself that will define success or being good at that activity. In the case of playing a guitar, for example, what are you doing when you play the guitar? Well, you're holding an instrument and you are telling that instrument to make certain sounds, certain noises, certain notes and chords and scales. And if you're good at the guitar, then of course the guitar does exactly what you want it to, right? And if I'm bad at the guitar, it's just a matter of I can make it make noises, but I can't make the noises that I hear in my head. I can't intentionally make noises. I'm just sort of strumming around and seeing what happens. I mean, if you're a jazz musician, right? As Miles Davis says, jazz is about playing the right, wrong notes. You play wrong notes, but you play them intentionally. It's not an accident. As opposed to when I play wrong notes, it's an accident because I can't play the right ones. Right? So that's what it means to be good at the guitar. It's doing that activity intentionally and well and deliberately. It's not about whether or not we like what you're doing. And in the same way, then, being good at being human is not going to be a matter of other people appreciating what you're doing, or doing what pleases other people, or doing what you're allowed to do. These rational activities, what it means to do them excellently or virtuously in the language of this page. To do these activities virtuously is just to be good at the activities by their own standards. And so what this means is that in order to continue figuring out what happiness is, we are going to have to look at these two activities. And we're going to have to try to figure out, what does it mean to do these two activities well on their own terms? The activity of exercising thought all by itself, and the activity of deliberate decision-making and self-governance. If we can be good at both of those activities, by definition, we'll be happy. It's now just a matter of figuring out what it means to be good at those activities so that we can get on with doing it.